Welcome everybody to Heal the Shadow in Your Relationships Too. And today I'm very pleased to have with me Dr. Jamie Turndorf. Welcome, Jamie.
Hello, nice to be with you.
And I'm going to tell everybody a little bit about you. Dr. Jamie is known as Dr. Love through her website, askdrlove.com. And it was the web's first and immensely popular relationship advice site since 1995. Wow, congratulations. So Dr. Turndorf has been delighting readers and audiences for 3 decades. Wow, with her engaging blend of professional expertise, spicy humor, and ability to turn clinical psychobabble into easy to understand concepts that transform lives and heal relationships, which is what we're all about here. And my goodness, Jamie, your methods have been featured everywhere. The list is so long. It's like CNN, NBC, CBS, VH1, Fox. We could go on and on. But suffice to say that Jamie is very well publicized and has been in all the major media. And also she is the author of the Hay House book, Kiss Your Fights Goodbye. And we're going to be focusing on that one. It was endorsed by New York Times, best-selling authors Jack Canfield, Dr. John Gray, John Bradshaw. And then I understand your career took a surprising turn following your husband's death from a bee sting. And this is very interesting to me when you say his miraculous and over-the-top spirit manifestations, often in front of witnesses, have shown her that we don't die and our relationships are not meant to end in death. So that is like a topic for a whole other summit and a whole other time. But suffice to say that Dr. Jamie has written another book called Love Never Dies, How to Reconnect and Make Peace with the Deceased. So another time would love to talk about that. But for now, we're going to talk about the shadow, and I'm going to ask you, kind of your own definition of what you see as the shadow.
Well, that's interesting because the shadow is really the part of ourselves that is wounded and that we have disconnected from, what I call in Kiss Your Fights Goodbye, the old scar. That's the shadow. And out of the shadow comes all the negative feelings that surround the old scar, the hurt, the sadness, and then the anger, which most people do convert the hurt and the sadness into anger. And then when that anger, that shadow, that dark side gets dumped on our partners, our relationships tank. So that's what Kiss Your Fights Goodbye is all about, is how to really use your relationship for its highest and most divine purpose, which is to help each other heal your old scars. And as you help each other heal your old scars, all that hurt and the sadness and the anger just fades away, allowing the love that brought you together to shine brighter than ever.
Well, I do love that you use the word your divine purpose in relationship, because that's what I'm all about here, being a spiritual practitioner. And you have said that old scars from childhood cause the fighting that we get in our relationships. So can you explain about old scars affecting our fighting?
Okay, so this is something that most people don't know about, and I do talk a great deal about the necessity to cool the relationship climate by healing what I call the old scars. Now, the old scars are not the injuries you suffered in the gym or during the war. I'm talking about the emotional scars that we all carry from childhood. And old scars heat the relationship climate and fuel our fights in 2 ways. The first way is what I call fight intensity. So old scars create a disproportionate reaction to present day events. This is because our brains work by association, always comparing present day events with earlier experiences, with the wounds we suffered as kids. Now, I call this the emotional lake effect. Think about the actual lake effect, as a storm picks up intensity, gathering moisture as it passes over the Great Lakes. Well, our brains dip into the reservoir of our unconscious and make us emotionally remember similar past hurts. And this explains why fireworks are going off inside of us over a small offense in the present, because the unconscious associations are adding fuel to the current fire, and we're actually drowning in feelings from past similar hurts. So when you have a disproportionately intense reaction to an apparently minor event in the present, that's your first clue that old scars are fueling your fire. So let me give you an example of this.
Please.
Husband and wife are in a restaurant. He repeatedly keeps checking his wristwatch. Finally, the wife blows a gasket. Well, if you can't wait to get away from me, well, then get the check and let's get the F out of here. And he's looking at her, what? He says, I was just looking to make sure to feed the meter on time, and now you're handing me this emotional fine. Why? Her emotional lake effect had been tripped, because her father never had any time for her. So when her husband was looking at his watch, her mind associated with the dad who never had time with her, and she was going nuts. Now, here's the second way that the old scars fuel our fights. They make it so that you can't shake the feeling. Now, we don't shake the feeling is because we're emotionally stuck, because we aren't consciously aware that an old scar has even been triggered. And when this happens, we're experiencing an emotional memory that's been disembodied from the actual memory. And so because we don't know where the feelings are truly coming from, we can't wrap our brains around the real issue and resolve it. So we just get stuck with intense feelings that we can't shake, and this heats the climate and creates more fighting. And so because couples aren't aware of what the real core issue is, they end up fighting over the overt issue that got the ball rolling, like the lack of foreplay, or he's glued to the TV, or the garbage is in a heap on the toilet, on the kitchen floor, or you left the toilet seat up. And the problem is that the overt fight content acts like a smokescreen that conceals the real issue, which is the old scar that lurks beneath. And until the real old scar, the real emotional issue is identified, you can never achieve resolution, and your fights just go unresolved and the climate gets hotter and hotter. So would you believe the solution to this problem is stripping? And I am not talking about getting naked, not getting naked. I'm talking about my technique, which is called stripping away the fight content to uncover the old scar. And to do this, I show you in Kiss Your Fights Goodbye how to draw a fight map, where you remove the content from the equation, the who did what to whom, and you just focus on charting the emotional course of the fight. You identify what you feel now, when you felt this way as a kid, who was doing what to you then, and then last but not least, you want to identify your happy ending, which is what you wanted and needed from your parent that you didn't get. And so to achieve your happy ending this time around, you're going to discuss your old scar with your partner, as I show you how to do in Kiss Your Fights Goodbye, and you're going to explain what kind of emotional treatment you needed then and now. And this way, you and your mates are transformed instantly from enemy to ally, and now you are using your relationship for its highest and most divine purpose, to help each other heal your old scars. And as you help each other heal your wounds, the fighting vaporizes. So I have an example of a couple who was in this kind of a bind. Would you like me to tell you?
Oh, sure. I'm sure that we can all relate to that last story that you were talking about. We've all been there, where something just so small annoys us so deeply.
And that's when people do not realize, oh my gosh, this is the smoke screen. This is just the triggering agent. And they get so caught up in the overt content, and then you go miles and miles away from the real issue, which is identifying and healing the old scar in the relationship. So this was happening to a couple, Keith and Betsy. And, I've had hundreds of thousands of couples use my method. So I'll just give you this couple as an example. And they're very representative of what happens in all relationships. What was happening was he felt very hurt that she didn't want sex with him. She had had a hysterectomy. She lost her sex drive. Now, he, without realizing it, took her lack of interest as she doesn't love me, because it was tipping off his old scar. His mother was a drunk. She never had time for him. She never held him. So he went into his emotional lake effect. But when he brought her all of his hurt and his rage and everything else, he became, for Betsy, the mother who was always mad at her and always scolding her. And this is what happens for us. Our old scars are like two interlocking puzzle pieces.
Yes.
We found each other for this reason, because we knew we would touch each other off, and so that we would help each other heal. Unfortunately, most people don't get to the healing. They kill each other before they get there. And the relationship ends.
Or they leave, yeah.
Right. They kill each other. They kill off the relationship. So she was hating his guts, so whatever started out as a low sex drive because she had lost her hormones became, now I don't want to have sex with you because you remind me of my mother and you're mad at me. So I had them both come into therapy. Now, mind you, they hadn't had sex for 30 years. Ooh. This is how long it went on. And I worked with them individually. I helped them each identify their old scar, as I help you to do in Kiss Your Fights Goodbye. Right? And then I help them work with each other to give each other the right emotional communications, so that she felt he didn't resent her and he didn't take it so personally. And we worked it all out, and they got laid again, and regularly from that point.
Oh, how wonderful. That's a great happy ending. So happy to hear it. So it's just absolutely wonderful the way you describe the process of stripping away the surface story so that you could get to what's really going on underneath, and excavate all the stuff that we're carrying around, which is why we attracted this particular partner to begin with.
And here's the trick, is that most people, it's said that most people's relationships fall to pieces because we cannot bear the inevitable regression that happens. By regression, it means the return to these old scars and then all the bad feelings that go with it. No relationship can survive under that heat. But with my method, you recognize that this is actually supposed to happen, but you don't fall into the trap of allowing yourselves to aim your cannons at each other so that then you destroy each other in the relationship. Instead, you become the ally, so that I say to you, wow, when you looked at your watch, it reminded me of my dad who didn't have time for me. Now I'm describing my old scar, and I'm helping you have empathy for me rather than, who the hell are you? Blah, blah, blah. And that's when all the healing comes about, through the awareness and describing it. And I talk a lot about how it's very important that we must cool down the climate. And the first part of Kiss Your Fights Goodbye gives you all my cool down techniques, not just, identifying and healing the old scars, but all of them. Would you like to talk about some more of them?
I would, but let me just address what you just said there. So if you're in that situation, and if you have the awareness that, the guy looking at his watch reminds you of your father, then you can take responsibility. But what if you don't have the awareness that that's what triggered you?
So you go back to the two clues. That your feelings are so strong, it's a warning. As they say in AA, if it's hysterical, it's historical. So you say to each other, listen, I'm blowing a gasket. I don't even know why, but let's work together to figure out what old scar has been tipped off beyond my awareness.
And the bottom line is, if we each take responsibility for our emotional reaction and not put it on the other person, it's like, I don't know why I'm feeling this way. This is what I'm feeling right now.
Work with me. Let's share it together. Let's figure it out. And then your partner, being your ally, will say, well, I do remember your dad had no time for you. Oh, yeah, that's what it is. Because the overt content often acts as a smokescreen, as I said, and it blocks us from making the connection we need to make. We get so caught up in the overt content. We really think it's about the wristwatch and the restaurant, and we get blind. So our partners can help us with that. So if it's a strong reaction, it seems disproportionate to the triggering event, and we can't shake it, we need to do our emotional homework. And I show you in Kiss Your Fights Goodbye how to do that.
Sounds fantastic. I'm sure everybody wants to get that book and find out all about it. So tell us now about the relationship climate control techniques, and what is that?
Okay, so basically, I have to back up because we didn't say this in the beginning of the talk, but I need to explain this because most people do not know this. Okay. And that is that almost all relationship fighting is caused by a chemical imbalance in men's bodies. And people don't know this. It's what I call the chemistry of conflict. Now, heated fighting triggers a biochemical imbalance in men's bodies. This is because men are biologically hardwired to be hyperreactive to stress and danger. And this programming dates back to prehistoric times when men were hunters and they needed to react with lightning speed to flee or to fight dangerous prey. Now, modern danger is no longer the ferocious tiger. It's the pissed off wife or girlfriend. Now, when she comes at him baring her teeth and berating him with criticism, his body sees danger and involuntarily switches into ANS, autonomic nervous system arousal, and this triggers the fight-flight response. Now, since most guys don't want to physically fight their partners, they flee instead. And now there are 3 ways that men flee from conflict. The first type is physical fleeing. He leaves the room, the house, he hides out in his workshop, he avoids coming home.
He goes to his cave.
He goes to his man cave. He avoids you. This fleeing. Now, the second type of fleeing is mental or psychic fleeing. Here, the mind takes a hike. The guy is physically present, but he looks deaf, dumb, and blind. He's wearing a no hablo inglés expression. He's drooling on his tie. He's physically present, but mentally gone. Now, the third type...
I love the way you describe that. I think we all got the visual. It was great.
Right? Now, the third type of fleeing that a guy does is verbal fleeing. Here, he's verbally escaping responsibility. He's justifying, he's making excuses, yes. He's defending himself. Now, here's the most important thing for women to know. Because women are not aware that these various fleeing behaviors are caused by primitive biological programming, a woman thinks her guy is fleeing because he doesn't give a crap enough about her to stick around and resolve the fight. So she feels hurt, and then her hurt morphs into anger. But when she turns up the heat and she blasts him with her wrath, she unwittingly sets off more biological fire alarms and more fleeing. Because remember I said it's heated fighting that triggers this biochemical imbalance. And this is the downward spiral that is the number one cause of relationship conflict, divorce, and domestic violence. So the how we break the cycle, I said, remember, heated fighting triggers the chemical imbalance. Well, it turns out that cooling the relationship climate literally shuts off the fight-flight response, meaning husband withdrawal magically disappears, and then guys stick around. They want to stick around to resolve their conflicts with you, and that's easy to be done using my step-by-step conflict resolution program, which happens in the second part of Kiss Your Fights Goodbye. So in the first part, I show you how to cool it down, because there's no conflict resolution possible if he's gone in one way or another.
Right.
So the first way we cool the climate down is to identify and eliminate what I call the fight traps. These are those faulty fighting tactics that heat the climate and cause more chemical imbalance and more withdrawal behaviors. Now, I break fight traps down into 2 categories: open and secret warfare. Now, open warfare are those direct forms of acted out anger, like name calling, character assassinations, guilt tripping, I told you so, paybacks, the outright screw yous. Now, secret warfare is the indirect expression of anger, but it still heats the climate all the same. And secret warfare, I list them all in Kiss Your Fights Goodbye. I forgot, recruiting allies, the silent treatment. Doesn't matter. Here's the point. Whether you're using open or secret warfare, the point to remember is that whatever you say and do boomerangs back on you. And while it may feel good to get your rocks off in the moment, on the rocks is where your relationship is going to end up if you don't ditch your fight traps.
Oh, my goodness.
We must commit to not gratify ourselves at another person's expense. And if you hurt your partner, you just must remember you're hurting yourself.
So hard when the adrenaline is coming up in that
But you know
moment.
what? It's a decision. It's an absolute decision and a choice. I'll never forget, we're talking about controlling our urges.
Yeah.
I had a guy come to me 30-something years ago from a very famous family. He was arrested for flashing.
Oh.
And he was in jail, and the famous family said, can you help him? So the first thing I said to him is, you've got to keep it in your pants. I mean, if we're going to cure you, you've got to control the urge. Then we can figure out what's causing it and work out the underlying problem. It's the same thing. We've got to keep our mouths in our pants. Just keep it in, because you know that whatever you say and do boomerangs back on you. And if you can go into action and whip your tongue out, you can go into action, walk the other way, put cold water on your face, and do whatever you got to do.
Yeah, that's the thing is like, take yourself out of the situation if you can't calm down in that moment.
Right.
And then you can work it out with yourself on your own and get centered until you can bring yourself back.
In Kiss Your Fights Goodbye, I have first aid techniques to cool yourself down, how to dig up love feelings, and all of it. So I take you step by step.
Awesome.
So now the second way we want to cool the climate is what I call train your brain to fight for you, not against you.
Oh,
so what do I mean
good.
by this?
Sounds great.
So this is easier said than done, because all of us in our intimate relationships fall into what I call the echo process. Now, this is nothing more than a negative cognitive distortion that makes us unconsciously hear our parents talking when our partners are speaking to us. And obviously, trouble erupts when we hear our parents and we distort then what we're seeing and hearing. So let me give you an example of this. It's Tuesday night, which is chicken night in this household. And on one particular Tuesday night, the husband says, is tonight chicken night already? Now she freaks out on him. What, you don't like my chicken? Well, you can go cook for yourself. Well, he just meant he couldn't believe how fast time flies. Now she heard her critical parent telling her that her chicken recipes stink. So to break the echo process, I show you how to use my training your brain to fight for you, not against you. And to do this, it's 5 steps. You hold your horses when you feel like you're going hot under the collar. Then second step, you take a step back in time, go back to your childhood. Step 3, you take a hard look at reality. You ask yourself, when did I feel this way as a kid and what was happening? And then you ask yourself, is there even a 1% chance I might be misreading my partner? And if there's even a 1% chance, step 4, check out your suspicions. And in this case, the wife would say, are you saying you don't like my chicken recipes? And then the husband would be able to help her in step 5, which is smoothing any ruffled feathers. And in this case, it would be chicken feathers. He'd say, no, baby, I love all your chicken parts. I love your breast, your thigh, your leg, you know. And now we're done.
Awesome. Well, you just got into kind of a sexual arena. So why don't we talk a little bit about sex fights? How common are they? How can we steer?
I call that the battle of the bulge. Because sex is often a battleground for non-sexual issues. So in my chapter, The Battle of the Bulge, I talk about how you can read between the sheets. That's my technique for discovering the real source of the fight. And I give you some fun case examples. And again, you're stripping away the overt content, you're reading between the sheets, and you're realizing that when you fight about sex, it's very rarely sex you're fighting about. Just like when we fight about money, very rarely about money. Because to the unconscious, sex is emotional feeding and nurturance and love. And so if I say you're not giving me enough sex or enough foreplay, I'm really talking about I don't feel loved.
Yes.
You know?
Yeah. And we're saying you don't love me enough or in the way that I want to be loved.
Right. And so now the trick is, and that's what part 2 of Love Never Dies shows you how to do, is how you can talk about your topic without setting off ANS arousal. And that's the most important thing, because people, especially we women, have been socialized to get very emotional, which is part of the female gender role. And then what we have a tendency to do is fall into one of the worst fight traps, which I call the 3 Scrooges: nagging, whining, and complaining. Yeah. So when you come to somebody and you nag and you whine and complain about what he's not giving, do you think that makes the person want to give you more? No, the person gets so upset, so triggered, goes into ANS arousal and withdraws from you and gives you less. So I show you how to break the cycle in Kiss Your Fights Goodbye.
Fantastic. And you also say that relationships need care and feeding. So what do you mean by that?
Well, I talk about the relationship essential nutrients because, we are no different than a car that needs maintenance or a plant that needs feeding and water and sun. The tricky part is that the relationship essential nutrients for women are different than the nutrients men require. Women require the two S's. That's short for safety and security, right? So it doesn't matter how much money a woman makes. We are biologically hardwired with a need to feel safe and protected by our partners. So what happens is if we don't feel safe and secure, the first thing that happens is our sex drive goes on the fritz because our body says, I don't want to be having a baby if this relationship isn't going to make it and there won't be a father here to protect me and the offspring. And even if we could be single parents, even if we could afford to do it all on our own, our biology doesn't understand this at all. Yeah. So we need to get the feeling that we're safe and secure in the relationship. So I show you in Kiss Your Fights Goodbye, I have techniques for men to be able to give you the right feeling of safety and security. And one of the best ways that we can do this is through listening. Because when you take the time to listen to me, really hold me in the palm of your hand like a little beloved bird, and you pay attention to everything I say, boy, do I feel safe and secure. Boy, do I know you want to stick around. So I have a lot of exercise in there to help guys learn how to listen, and there are a lot of fun exercises that you can do together. Now, the relationship essential nutrients for men are different. They are the two A's, admiration and appreciation. So we have to remember the male gender role is all about action, performing, protecting, providing. So a guy needs to be acknowledged for all the things he does for you to make you feel safe and secure and to protect you and your offspring. Now, if he gets his pats on the back and he feels admired and appreciated, well, then doesn't he feel like feeding you back the nutrients you need?
That is the key right there. Dr. T, it has been such a pleasure to be with you today. You are just a fountain of information, and I appreciate how valuable this all has been for our listeners. And I just so appreciate your having been here. We could have talked about so much more. And everybody go see AskDrLove.com. We've got the link to that down here too. And then your amazing other book about how love never dies, how to reconnect and make peace with the deceased. I'm sure
that's amazing because if you create a really powerful divine love, as I have lived in my life, that love doesn't ever die. And that's my romantic ongoing love story. Love never dies. So
yeah, I love that. And maybe one day I will do something on that topic too, because it is close to my heart as well. So thank you again for being with us, Dr. T. And everybody, see you on the next episode of Heal the Shadow in Your Relationships. Bye-bye for now.